Hi everyone, welcome to Legacy to Cloud series. In this video, we are going to build a complete end-to-end cloud migration pipeline on Microsoft Azure using real enterprise architecture. In most of the legacy systems, right, like in mainframe, the data is stored on physical data sets, flat data sets, on vSAN files, on DB2. Now, when you plan to migrate this data to cloud, it's often very difficult to connect to these data sources from cloud, right? Um, but what you can do is suppose if you have a vSAN file, you can run some kind of a sort card to transform that data and send it on a intermediate Windows or a Linux server on premises. And on that server, you can run some cloud tools like AzCopy to copy that to the cloud and do your further processing. So this is the basic idea, right? When you are working on some migration of a legacy systems, uh, these are the challenges we face. And in this project, I'm planning to simulate the same scenario, but I'll be using a local CSV file, right? And copy to cloud. So we'll be using a local copy file, right? You copy, so this system I'm building on Azure, right? Where I'm using copying a local CSV file uh, to Azure Blob using easy copy, right? We are using Azure copy, like, so we cannot directly just open in when we are working on an enterprise solution. We cannot directly copy the data to storage manually by opening the portal. We need some tool, right? High performance tool that can transfer the data, right? And we need to maintain the data integrity as well, right? So easy copy is one such tool where which enables checksum validation, so that we will be using to copy data from our local machine to blob storage. Also, we are using a blob storage as a staging layer or a landing zone. It is important because at that you can do validation, right? And if required, you can reprocess the files. And also, if there is a requirement to archive those files, the input files, that can be done, right? Now, once the data is there in Azure Blob Storage, you can, and if your target is say SQL DB, in this case it's SQL DB, but any other target, right? You can move from Azure to SQL DB by using doing many things. Like one is the data factory where you can create a pipeline, right? The second is maybe a logic apps or Azure function which will be triggered on Blob, right? So these are the few things that you can do, and we are going to use. But in this video, we are going to use Azure Data Factory. Okay. Now, so our Azure Data Factory will be the orchestration layer that will be used to move data from Azure storage to SQL database. Okay. And one important thing is, like, we should not, like, when we are working on an enterprise solution, we should avoid storing usernames or password. So in this case, we'll be using managed identities. We are not using any password or for storage, SAS keys or storage account keys. We are not. We'll be using managed identity. Now, to provision the infrastructure, I'll be using Terraform. So let's start with that. So first, what we will do is we will provision the infrastructure using Terraform. Then we will do easy copy. I'll show how to set up easy copy, how to set up your Terraform. Not exact setup, but where can you go, where can you refer, how to write your Terraform configurations. And then I'll showing you how I have set up the pipeline, that ADF pipeline to copy to SQL database. right? So now before we go, right, we start creating our infrastructure, it is always a good idea, to plan out what are the things that we need, right? So as you see, as per our architecture, right, we need the basic thing is the resource group, right, where we can, have all our resources. We need a storage account, a blob container, right? And on the target side, we need a SQL server, a SQL database. Then we need some RBAC roles and managed identities, right? We need SQL data roles, and on storage we need RBAC, so blob contributor. So all these things we need, and everything we'll be doing on Terraform. Okay, so now let's go to Visual Studio where I have already configured my, I've written my Terraform configuration. I'm not writing it from scratch. I've already done that, but I'll just show you that if you have to write it from scratch, how can you do that? So basically, you create this Terraform files for the main file where you have your configuration, the versions file where you provide the providers. Now, all these things you don't have to remember. What you can do is simply go to Terraform registry, right? You can go to the providers, you select the cloud provider, in this case Azure, right? You go to documentation, you see the version that is being used, and you see how you have to use it. They have given an example. Uh, in my case, I'm using the current version. Okay. So, an example of a resource group and everything that is needed. Similarly, so I have, I have given that provider configuration. In this case, I'm using a local backend. I'm not using a remote backend. So the backend in Terraform is used to store the state. So why we need to store the state is so that our Terraform configuration is repeatable. You run Terraform multiple times and you get the same result. Uh, so then, I have the main configuration. Let's go to the main configuration first. So I have the resource group. I have a random string that I'm using while creating the storage account. For storage account, I'm using standard tier and local replica. Then I'm using a storage container, right? Then I'm using a SQL server. I'm creating a SQL server. All this I've taken the example from here, right? You can just SQL server or you can select and it will give you. So let's say find for SQL server, hmm, SQL server. All this example that will provide it to you. Okay, and so I don't remember. It's I mean you don't have to remember it, you just have to understand that what does this mean, right? So and then I have the Azure Data Factory that I have created. I was also planning to do this on Azure function, but for this video I'll just be focusing on Azure Data Factory because that is the enterprise grade, right, where we use ADF to create the such pipelines. uh, After that, the main configuration to see, if you see here, there are some dot bar. These are basically the variables that I have created, right? So now I'm not, and I'm using only one environment, so I have not created a separate environment variable. But if you want to, maintain different environment, you can create different the variable files. So for my all variables are there in TF Terraform, the default Terraform.tf files, but you can have it on different, based on the environment. For example, you can create like for dev, you can have dev, and for prod, you can have prod, and you can run the same configuration. So I have already executed this configuration. The infrastructure is already there in Azure. I've already created it. I'm not going to rerun it. I'll just show it on the portal, right? So if you go home, if this is the, the if you see the variable name that I had selected, right? Now my TF where a variable have some sensitive data as well, which is not recommended. But for the this purpose of this video, I'm using it. So I have given the application name as migration environment and test primary location is Central India, and I'm using subscription ID. But in the portal, you can see I have my resource group. Within the resource group, I have the ADF, I have my SQL database server, my storage account, and within the storage account, I have my data container, right? And one of the files that I had transferred. So with this, my application infrastructure, the infrastructure that I need to, migrate my data is ready. Yeah. Now what I need to do is set up easy copy, right? So if you see, you can just click on this link, right? Or you can search easy copy on Google and you will get a link. So you just need to download a zip file, right? Here, depending upon your operating system, whether it's Windows, Mac, or Linux, unzip it and then provide that into your system path so that you can use easy copy from anywhere. Okay. Uh, And that this is just the setup for easy copy, which I have done. So I'll show you an example, right? I have, you can go and see that in our storage account under the container data, we have only one file, employees.csv, right? But I can just show you by transferring one file, right? So suppose I have this, uh, say test.csv, right? I'll transfer that and okay. I have touched the CSV, and then the easy copy gives us ability to check, have a checksum validation, and we need this checksum validation to to confirm the integrity of the data, that nothing is corrupted during network transmission. So that is why we are using this field, right? Okay. So let me just run this and see if we can see this file on our. So it says the job is completed and the file is transferred. Now I'll go to the portal again and see if I can see, the new data. I can see data and I can see the test file is there. Okay. So my easy copy is working. So now the file is there, okay, in the blob container, right? I've also provisioned the SQL database, right? I've given access to ADF. I've created, ADF user by running some queries, and so my SQL database is ready. My file is there in blob storage. Now I need to do is to create pipeline, right, in ADF. For that, see, uh, what first we have to do is to create the linked services, right? If I go to manage, right, in linked services, I've created two things. One is the blob and one is the SQL managed service. You can see I'm using managed identities. I'm not then link to service. I've given a name. Similarly for blob, right? After creating this, what we have done is we have created a data set, right? We are taking csv.file, okay? Uh, basically, and the schema, nothing else. Connection file, the link service name. I'm taking data from this container. My file name is this. I can also give a wildcard and teach first as a header. Similarly, for database, I have this, right? My employees table that I have created in the SQL database. After that, I create a pipeline. Okay, that mean move and copy. In the activities, I take move and copy. I select. Sorry, let me say. I select the source, which case is the blob, the link service that I created blob. Okay, and then I have the sync, which is SQL database, and then mapping, right? So, and I've also added a trigger, but we can run it manually as well for the purpose of this video. So, what I'll do is I'll go to my Visual Studio Code, create say one more file, or I'll take this file, okay, make some changes to this. I've you know, let's is 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 okay. I've created that, and I will again transfer this to my blob. Okay, now I will name it as employees, right? Employees.csv, and give it the name as emp data. So now my file is transferred. Okay, I can go to my storage account and check if the transfer is completed. Should be. I can see a CSV where I'll check the file contents. Okay, let me just download and see. So my data is there on the blob storage. Okay, so once the data is there, let's go. And I had created a trigger to run it on the blob creation event. So let's see if the trigger has run. If not, then we will run it manually. I don't see it, so let's just go there and run it now. Okay, now it's running the pipeline. So it says the run succeeded. I mean, to verify the data, now we can go to the SQL database, right? We can go to query manager, we can log in and run a query. And you can see that this data is already there. This was created earlier, and this is the data, new data that is installed. So this is how, a real migration solution can take place, right? An enterprise migration solution can take place where you are creating infrastructure which is repeatable. We can create it multiple times, and same infrastructure will be created. You're not depending on creating your infrastructure through clicking on portals, right? So I hope you get some understanding of as to how we can approach legacy migration to cloud. And please do let me know if you have any questions or you want me to explain something in more detail. I'll be happy to share that. Thank you for joining. and see you in the next video.